All right. For this episode of the Courage Coaching and Counseling Podcast, I've got Summer and Risa. Welcome, guys, to the podcast.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
Thanks. This is really fun.
The, Risa and Summer specialize in trauma therapy and also other concerns. Uh, they've developed a, a group counseling, group therapy program, Seeking Safety, that is faith-based. I'm excited to learn more about this program. But before we dive into that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your backgrounds.
Sure. I'll go first. So I'm Summer Krause, and I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. And actually, Risa and Savan and I all went to graduate school together. I did my undergraduate degree at Seattle Pacific University in Christian education and got involved in ministry within juvenile detention centers as a volunteer chaplain, and just really fell in love with that work, and had just noticed over the course of working with youth who were incarcerated that there was just an unbelievable amount of trauma. And that is what prompted me to go to graduate school and attend Western Seminary in the counseling program, was to try to help us this trauma related theme that seemed to be unaddressed once the youth's difficulty coping had escalated to the degree that they were in trouble with the law. So I went to Western Seminary and did the master's in counseling program with a youth specialization. And when I graduated, started working in a residential treatment program for youth who were in state custody, on probation or parole, who had issues with addiction, mental health, criminal behavior. And that's when I was first introduced to the Seeking Safety model. Someone knowing what had drawn me to the field said, "Have you heard about this model? It was originally developed for adults, but is also being used successfully with adolescents as well." And at that time, I hadn't heard of Seeking Safety, but I remember going onto the website to find out when the next training would be. And it was happening really soon, and it was happening in Canada. But I didn't have children back then. So it was a lot easier to ask my husband if he wanted to go on a road trip. And we just kind of on a whim drove to Canada and heard Dr. Najovitz, who developed the model, give a presentation, and just really fell in love with it. Came back, started implementing individual and group sessions using the Seeking Safety curriculum, and found it to be really effective. And that just sort of naturally morphed. So I started using the model with a difficult to serve population. I developed my own bag of tricks in terms of how to really maximize the engagement of the youth. I had reached out to the author and shared with her some of what I was doing in the program, and did a couple of consultations with her. And then we have started working together now for a number of years, developing an adolescent specific version of Seeking Safety. Also started providing consultation to organizations using the model, doing trainings. I am a part of a group practice out of Portland, Western Psychological and Counseling Services, which is now Life Stance, just very recent switch over there, but continue to use Seeking Safety in my counseling practice with both adolescents and adults. And over the course of using Seeking Safety in secular settings, primarily Seeking Safety is not a faith-based model, it's completely secular. But as a Christian and as somebody who's been in ministry for many years, I found that just the ideals of the treatment were very congruent with Christian ideals as well. And so over the years, Risa and I have been working together. Actually, Risa and I worked together before we went to graduate school together. Let's see, after my undergraduate degree, we started working at a girls' group home. This was before I was married. I think Dale and I started dating when we were working together in a group home together. So Risa and my path have just crossed many different ways over the years. And so we'll have a chance to share with you more about what we have created. But
Yeah.
basically now this whole new layer of things with Seeking Safety is creating this faith-based addendum that I'm really excited about.
That's awesome. So you have been using the Seeking Safety uh, curriculum and materials for over 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I so uh, I don't. I remember summer when we had a case conference where we share our counseling
Yeah.
as students. Uh, you know, 18 years ago.
Yep.
18 years ago, I remember you doing presentations and thinking, boy, if my kids need counseling, I should send them to summer.
Oh.
I and that was 18 years ago.
Oh,
And
thanks so
you've
much.
been doing this work for so long. You're such an expert. Like you've got so much experience. So I'm excited to hear about like just how things have evolved. Um, so Risa, you know Summer from way back.
Way back.
Yeah. So and we shared or we were neighbors at a New Day Counseling Center for many years. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, can you share a little bit about your background too?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I'm a counselor just like you guys. Same program, same path to LPC, and kind of where that started for me a little bit is in undergraduate. I went to Calvin College and I got a degree in cultural studies and sociology. My intention on graduating was to become a social worker. I had a lot of safe adults in my life that I can talk about that a little later, that just had a really positive impact on me, and that really fueled a passion to become a safe adult for other kids. And so I had done an internship as a residential counselor in a group home through the end of college. And so when I took a job, my first, big girl job post graduation, it was ended up being with the same organization that Summer was working with in the group home in Portland, Oregon. And so that's actually what brought me out to Oregon. I moved there for that job. And I spent 6 years working with at-risk youth in both boys and girls homes. And it was probably about halfway through my time there that I realized two things. One was that I didn't so much enjoy all of the things that go along with working in a group home, but I loved sitting with the kids and just hearing their stories. And just something really powerful about being invited into that really intimate space of someone just sharing their pain with you. And then the second thing that I realized is that I was not equipped to personally handle these stories that I was hearing. And I also just felt ill-equipped to respond appropriately, like, listening, which is first and foremost what people need. But these were kids with just so many other needs. And so I just really felt a strong pull, like I need to go back to school and get some more education and training to be better at this job that I have chosen to do. And so I was looking into all different options, and both of the people who were over me at the group home had been Western students. They both graduated from Western. And so they were like, yeah, we think you should really think about applying to Western. And I was like, seminary? No way. And God just kind of kept saying, yeah, no, you need to go. And so I very begrudgingly signed up, and I took one class the first semester. I was like, I'll take a class or two. And I was just hooked, like loved it. Loved it. I had a class with Kay, and then I had a class with Dave Wenzel, and that just kind of sealed the deal. And went back to school, ran into summer in school, and then graduated. I did community mental health for a while. I actually then was at Western Psych for a while. So it was one of the first places Summer and I overlapped a little bit professionally, and then ended up doing private practice. And kind of on the side of all of this all through graduate school and my professional career, my husband and I were church planting. on the side in our free time.
Wow.
And so we worked with several church plants in and through the Portland area in a variety of ministries, did that for almost 18 years, and started just seeing like really the brutal side of ministry, of, just all the joy and things that could come with that. But in our relationships with the pastors and people, seeing how much burnout and mental distress and moral failure and the things that can happen in a church, and just having these conversations about, so many of these things that we had inside information on, we were like, this could have been prevented. Like, what, what is happening? And just seeing over and over again, and just thinking like, just a little bit of preventative work, a little bit of like encouragement and support and counseling, could have prevented so much damage later on. And so we just really kind of were given this vision of, what would it look like to take care of these people who take care of everybody else.
Yeah. So that sounds like a whole other episode, Risa. Like, and it's something I'm passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been part of a church plant, and but as counselors at a Christian counseling center, we often have clients that are part of the fallout from when churches don't do well,
Yes.
or when leadership is unhealthy. So feel free to share as much as you like today. But man, you got my brain going.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so with the ministry that you did with your husband, what were some of your favorite parts of church planning?
My favorite parts was really just the sense of community and family. Like, it takes a lot of courage to plant a church. Like, these were people that had guts, that were willing to put aside everything else and really just kind of put themselves and their lives on the line to like bring Jesus to other people. Especially in Southeast Portland, church planting is nothing to be taken lightly. And so just getting to walk alongside and serve with people who were just all in for Jesus, but also the privilege of getting to be kind of on the inside and seeing the functioning and of how churches get started and what that looks like. Yes, that was probably my favorite part. It's honestly just the people, getting to do fun ministry with people who are just so committed to their passion.
Yeah. That's when you describe that, it's my wife and I, we joined a church plant, with 20 adults, and you set up the chairs, you work so hard. It's kind of like the start of a marriage.
Yeah.
Right? So much optimism, so much hope, so much faith, and then you burn out if you don't do it in a healthy way. And and you can crash and burn even things that get off to a great start. And for a lot of families and for a lot of children, life starts that way. Like life is safe, life is great, mom and dad cared for, until like trauma enters in to their life and their story, and then it changes everything. So wow, I didn't know you guys had psychological training and were working in the field before you hit campus. So yeah, no wonder you guys did so well. um, the so catch me up. So you just doing lots of work with community mental health, private practice, in different clinics, and so uh, in the recent past, you've been joining forces and and working together. So kind of what prompted you guys getting together to work together?
Well, gosh, for me, for a number of years, like I think I would go to church or just be doing like my own private devotional time. And because I did so much work with seeking safety professionally, like I know that material and the skills, and I'm really passionate about it in my work. And then, of course, have a relationship with the Lord. And so as I'm reading scripture or hearing sermons, I just kept finding myself thinking, oh, that scripture would go so well with this topic. And this sermon, boy, that would work so well in conjunction with this principle from the treatment. And so I just kept finding myself feeling these prompts from the Holy Spirit to, this is an opportunity for um, seeking safety to be able to be used in a ministry setting. Because one unique thing about seeking safety is that it is not a model that requires people to be clinicians in order to conduct it, or to have a master's degree, to be certified. It was designed really with public health in mind as a low-cost model, and it's been out since the early 90s. But in the more recent studies that have been done on seeking safety, they've been conducted peer-to-peer. So lay people can facilitate this group either, or this curriculum, either individually or in a group. And so because of that, I started thinking, like, what about pastors? What about volunteers within the church? Could some of this excellent evidence-based trauma-informed material be able to be used within a faith-based setting? Because one thing that I'm very aware of is that a lot of people, when they're experiencing trauma or addiction, they don't say, hey, who's the closest therapist that I can call up? Where's the behavioral health center for me, right? But instead, they go to church, right? For believers, a lot of time their first stop is their pastor. It's a small group. It's their faith community. And while that's a great first step to take and can be really a meaningful part of the healing journey, also aware that, kind of in the line of what Risa was sharing, is many times ministry workers, their training is not around dealing with child abuse and rape and war, and dealing with the absolute terrible things that humans can do to one another, and the burden that has put on ministry workers to try to navigate really deep waters. And of course, the spiritual aspect of healing, I believe, is incredibly important, but there's also that risk to be well-intentioned, but to sort of over spiritualize or oversimplify or do harm with good intentions, right? And so wanting sort of this desire for churches to be able to be trauma informed and have materials and skills that can help aid people in their healing, that are that have solid backing, right? That these are things that are psychologically sound, but also there is nothing within seeking safety that's incongruent with Christian faith. And in fact, I think it can work really well in harmony. So for me, for years, there had been this prompting, and I have been working with the author of Seeking Safety, Lisa Najavich. She and I have been working for years on trying to develop an adolescent-specific version of the work that's been slow going. We will finish it, but it's been slow going. And at some point, it felt like this was what the Holy Spirit kept putting on my heart to do, was to create this faith-based addendum. And so then through Risa and my friendship, and our families are friends, and the work, being a part of her team for the work that she's doing in Portugal, which I'm sure she'll share more about at some point, but working with missionaries around, missionaries who've experienced a tremendous amount of trauma on the field, and being able to minister to them, was able to share with her some of the seeking safety principles and what I was using, and that felt to her like, I'll let you speak for yourself, but to be congruent with what she was looking for in the ministry she was doing. So we said, well, let's work together. And it became very grassroots. I mean, started out in the living room, both of us and our husbands, like just talking about this as a possibility. And then, they continued with their plans moving forward. So their lives became very complex and preparing for the mission field. And we moved out into the country. And so there was this dedication. It was almost like, Risa said this, and I think it's so true. It was almost like the book was going to write itself if we didn't get on board. It was going to happen. And so we would meet together around this picnic table in my sunroom out here in the country, and the husbands would be in charge of the kids for the evening while we worked together and just started trying to create what might this look like. And I remember at some point we thought, okay, we should like present this to Dr. Najovitz, not really knowing like how she would feel about us creating like a Christian faith-based supplement to her work. And of course, I've worked with her closely for years, so it felt really scary to ask her, hey, what do you think about if we created like a addition to your book that could be used? And so we did. We had that conversation, and she couldn't have been more supportive throughout the process, more affirming as she read what we had written and really encouraged us. And so we worked over the course of, what would we figure, about 3 years?
Maybe? Almost 4.
Yeah.
Almost 4.
A long time. And it was just one step at a time. But it came together, and it's been the best partnership that I've ever been a part of. I mean, Risa, she has been such an amazing, friend, but partner in this process. We just seem to be able to balance each other's strengths and weaknesses and be of one mind throughout the process. And it was just a really rewarding, meaningful process.
Awesome.
Yeah, there was actually a little bit of sadness when we finished the book. And my brain immediately went to, okay, what's the next project? What are we going to work on together next?
My goodness. With juggling private practice and ministry and parenting, like you're familiar with work mode and working hard. So, Risa, could you, or for both of you, trauma informed care or ministry, and could you share a little bit more about seeking safety? Like, what are the elements of that curriculum for listeners that aren't familiar with it?
Sure. Do you want to start with trauma informed, Risa, and I'll jump in about seeking safety?
Sure, let's do that. It was funny as I was thinking about preparing for this podcast, I had that same thought of, we talk a lot about, one of the struggles with churches is that they're not trauma informed, but what on earth does that even mean? And so I think, and Summer, feel free to, fill in your own definition and additional blanks here. But to me, that is really having a sensitivity and a compassion around never knowing what a person has lived through, what they've experienced, and where they're coming from. And a lot of that obviously involves being eager to listen and slow to speak when you sit with people, but really developing awareness and educating yourself on what does trauma mean. And I was 19 was the first time I sat down with a counselor. And it was both life destroying and life changing, because there had been so much trauma in my life already up at that point that I didn't even know that that's what it was. I would never have identified some of my early experiences as trauma. And so there's this moment where everything just falls apart and you come to the realization of, oh, like I had no idea what those things were, how they affected me. And so a little bit of trauma informed is just recognizing that the things that happen to us can have lifelong impact. And that often the way we see our world and the way we relate to others and our behavior stems from that trauma. And more often than not, we don't even know it. And so sometimes what we see is the behavior and the reaction and the outplaying of trauma. And, there's a saying they use in our church and other places I've heard, hurt people, right? We lash out and we pass on, in a sense, our trauma reactions to others. But just learning to stop and think like, wow, like the reaction from this person, my interaction with this person was hurtful to me. And, as human beings, sometimes our first response is to want to like get back at them or shake our head or think they're crazy or anything along those lines. But so being trauma informed to me is a little bit really stopping to think, but why is this person relating to me in this way? Where does that come from? Especially in our, in our work with kids and youth. It was such an eye-opener to me to have that kind of behind the scenes window in those conversations where kids were really sharing their hearts, to really get to know them as people rather than just seeing them as their symptoms or seeing them as their behavior. I know Summer worked especially with kids who'd gotten in trouble with the law, and for most of them coming to realization, like none of that was their fault. It was all just this compilation of trauma over a lifetime that had gotten them into the situation. And so especially with churches, for me, helping churches be more trauma informed, and a huge motivator for getting this book into the hands of churches is even just basic education about mental illness and how mental illness affects a person, and how mental illness coexists with addiction, and how those two things then affect a person's life, and seeing it as an opportunity to direct a person to healing rather than judging and blaming them for what's going on in their life.
Yeah, judging and blaming people for their struggles or their lack of growth. And I think a lot of church leaders, or even just folks, maybe not even in leadership, they don't realize how powerful addiction and trauma are in people's lives. Like just how hard it is to overcome. It's not just a matter of like just wanting to get better. So many people that struggle want to get better. So many people that have anxiety and depression want to get better. And it's not just as simple as more willpower or faith or uh, spiritual disciplines.
Yeah.
It is a recovery and healing process, and it's hard to well, not hard. There is a tension or uh, parallel realities that um, in the Christian faith we believe that we're renewed and we're born again, um, and that God's with us and resides in us. And there's also this reality of addictions and trauma that are hardwired into our bodies and into our brains. Um, and the uh, yeah, it it's not something we learn in seminary. Before getting my counseling degree, I did a pastoral studies degree. I thought I was going to be a chaplain, pastor, and we had discipleship classes, and discipleship for folks listening. It's just like uh, mentoring, leadership, and developing folks in younger believers in the faith. So there was this idea of leading and shepherding and caring for people, but it certainly wasn't trauma informed. And, but that was 25 years ago. So hopefully things are better now with seminary education. But yeah, I'm glad you guys have developed this resource for to increase that awareness and also knowledge for how to help people.
Right. And I think, not just within Christian circles, as you say, like hopefully, things have changed over the last 25 years, and that as people are in ministry training, that there's more attention and training that can go around mental health, addiction, trauma. But I also think just there's a greater public awareness of issues around trauma. There's certainly this movement towards trauma informed care, which I tend to think of it as having some basic training or awareness of issues around trauma that becomes sort of a lens for understanding some of the behaviors that Risa was sharing, and to assume that trauma is at play even when you don't know people's stories. Right? Sometimes we're more sensitive when right? Oh, this person's been through a lot of hardship. They're coming out of a violent relationship, and there can be more awareness of maybe some of what's going on is related to that experience. But most of the time, people don't meet you and lay out their story. Well, let me give you a little background here, right? That will help you understand my quirks and challenges we may have relationally coming up. That's not going to happen. People don't tell their stories, and it may not be appropriate for them to. These are oftentimes the worst and most vulnerable parts of people's lives.
Yeah. Don't put it
Um,
on your dating profile.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. A new category, right? A little about me. Well, it started when I was 5. So, um, absolutely. So, when we're looking at ministry and trauma-informed ministry, is to assume that trauma is at play and to recognize that you may not know what people have experienced in their lives. They may not tell you. But we know that most people in the United States do experience trauma. And so if you just assume that trauma is at play with everyone, most of the time you'll be right anyway. To share a little bit specifically about seeking safety, seeking safety is the first model that was designed to treat both post-traumatic stress disorder and substance abuse as two interrelated issues. So within the therapy world, these two diagnoses traditionally have been treated as two separate issues. You go see your mental health provider around issues with mental health and trauma. You see a drug and alcohol counselor, go to an addiction program related to substance abuse, and never the two shall meet. But what we know is there's this tremendous relationship between the two, that among people with PTSD, the number one co-occurring disorder is a substance use disorder. So we see tremendously high rates of substance abuse among people who have PTSD. And among people with substance abuse issues, really high rates of trauma and PTSD as well. And the intersection between the two is tremendous, that you almost can't talk about one issue without talking about the other. So seeking safety was developed to be able to focus on that intersection, that interrelationship, to treat both disorders at the same time as part of integrated care. And one of the reasons that historically, for people in the counseling field, people were advised not to touch the trauma when working with someone who struggles with addiction is because at the time and historically, all of the models for treating PTSD were focused on the past. So as people sort of dove into the worst moments of their lives and started reliving them and sharing the gory details and feeling all the feelings of things, like Risa, what you were sharing, may have been locked up for many years and didn't even recognize it was there. Well, if there's also addiction at play, the substance abuse tended to spiral out of control. So seeking safety is designed to be a present focused model, which means that even though the trauma may have happened in the past, the thing about trauma is it doesn't just stay in the past, it leaks. It leaks into our lives now and continues to affect us in a variety of ways. And so in this model, it's not about going back and telling the story. It's about how do I manage the leakage in my life today. And so, in fact, one of the rules in this particular approach is that you don't go into details about past trauma. We focus on the present. And that's why it's able to be used by a broader range of roles. So not just clinicians or therapists, for example, but because we're focused on the present, essentially it's a safe coping skills model that's designed to help people move towards safety and away from danger and develop the coping skills for managing PTSD and trauma-related symptoms without substance abuse or other types of unsafe behavior. So it doesn't have to be substance abuse. Seeking safety has been used really broadly since it first came out. So now it's used with people who don't necessarily have PTSD or they don't necessarily abuse drugs or alcohol. The idea is to replace unsafe ways of coping, which might be it might be drugs or alcohol, but it might be a sex addiction, it might be problem gambling, it might be isolation, harsh self-talk, overeating, undereating, codependency. I mean, you name it. There's a variety of different ways that we try to cope that may not be healthy or safe for us.
Mm.
So the idea is identifying what are some of those unsafe behaviors in your life currently, and then developing coping skills that are healthier and safer for you as a way of recovering from trauma. And the evidence has been really strong. There have been many dozens of studies done on seeking safety in a wide variety of different settings, wide variety of different populations. It's used all over the globe, 14 different languages. And so it's very versatile. And so, as we're looking at this work now, is to be able to hopefully pave the way for faith-based services to be able to use the material with a stronger emphasis on how that interacts with people's spiritual lives.
Mm. So seeking safety, it's worldwide. Where do folks access uh, the groups? Are they like held like at schools or clinical settings, or do churches like host it, like different other support groups like Grief Share or AA?
Yeah, we're hoping to be able to create more of that because I think it is a really natural model to be used within faith-based settings. It is used in faith-based settings. We're hoping to just create materials and awareness of this as a tool so that it can be in more places. But we have a gentleman that we communicated with who's using it in a faith-based treatment center out of the UK, and a nun using seeking safety in her ministry in the Philippines. Just it's been very interesting to hear some of the places that seeking safety is used. But where do people receive seeking safety? I mean, I would say option D, all of the above. So it's used within the VA, it's used in counseling centers, it's certainly used in schools. Through seekingsafety.org, which is kind of the hub of information related to seeking safety, there is a list of providers to sort of see who's in your area that provides this. And certainly it may be clinical settings, or, I do a lot of work with peer recovery specialists, for example, working, with people who have lived experiences of their own that are providing support, not as clinicians, but as peers coming alongside of people. So yeah, all of the above. And we've had a chance to try it out. We did some trial groups with our materials in conjunction with the Seeking Safety material with groups of seminary students. So Western Seminary counseling students, one of their requirements as going through the program is they have to do a certain number of hours of either group therapy, or I think couples therapy is the other option. So we provided this as an option, and we had full groups with a wait list each time that we offered it. Feedback was really positive, so that was very rewarding. And we've had unbelievable response from pastors and ministry leaders learning about what we're doing, sort of like, great, how soon can we get our hands on this? We need this. We have an awareness that there's so much trauma among people we're ministering to, but we don't feel like we have the tools. And there aren't a lot of great resources that are out. There are some, but this is one that's clearly needed around trauma, addiction, and also incorporating the faith aspect of that healing.
Yeah, that was kind of what got us into this whole mess. Is I was working just over the years. That was actually why I came to work at A New Day, was because of all the relationships with ministry organizations and churches. And that was kind of my primary clientele, working with professional helpers and ministry leaders. And I was bemoaning to Summer just the lack of available materials for individual counseling and for groups that was both psychologically accurate and sound, but also faith-based. Like, it just seemed like there's a lot of like Christian counseling, biblical counseling resources that were very faith-based, and in some cases just way too over spiritualized for anything that was going to reach a person who's been traumatized. They don't want to be told they just need to pray harder. And then on the other hand, there's a lot of really good psychological books out there, but they didn't integrate or work well with the faith component. You know, there's a few, like Mending the Soul is a really great curriculum, but like a lot of them, that's really focused on particular types of trauma or abuse. And I was looking for something that could be used with any type of trauma or experience and then integrated. And I knew a little bit about, you can't know Summer and not know about Seeking Safety, because it just kind of is a part of her and who she is and oozes out. But I didn't know a whole lot about it until we started having these conversations, especially around people in ministry who are struggling and people who were further wounded by church's responses when they were struggling, and just, you know, what can be done about that. And so in the end, we did something about that.
Yeah. So this might be proprietary info, or but maybe you can give us a preview. So what are some of the things that you've like added to the Seeking Safety curriculum?
Yeah. So Seeking Safety, the curriculum, which you do need. I mean, you need the basic Seeking Safety book. Ours is a supplement, so it's not a standalone model. It's used in conjunction with the Seeking Safety manual. So Seeking Safety is made up of 25 different topics, but you don't have to do all 25 topics in order for people to benefit from it. So we chose 10. We chose, at least to start with, we chose 10 of the topics that we felt like were most foundational and would be really good ones to start with for people in faith-based settings. And those topics include things like safety, PTSD, taking back your power, detaching from emotional pain, which is a topic focused on a skill called grounding, which is essentially healthy distraction, taking good care of yourself, setting boundaries in relationships, healing from anger. So we took 10 topics, and then for each one of those, we created a supplement that went with that topic, that more focused on the faith-based aspects of healing, since that's not included. The spiritual aspect of healing isn't included. Not that it hasn't been used in faith-based settings or spirituality hasn't been incorporated into the work, but the model itself doesn't include more of those spiritual aspects. And so we created a supplemental handout for the client or the participant for every one of those topics. So an example would be like the topic healing from anger and Seeking Safety. It talks about anger towards others as well as anger towards yourself. Well, we included an additional section on what about anger towards God, right? And how do you deal with sort of messages that are out there within the church that, you know, anger is sin, right? That you should never feel angry, right? If you're a good Christian, anger shouldn't ever cross your emotional radar, which of course is not true, and it's not even biblical. But we wanted to sort of address some of those messages that people may have received within Christian culture that would be problematic in terms of dealing with incredible violation, right? Really dealing with evil and hardship and suffering in their lives. Anger is a normal and understandable part of that process. So we included that additional element. For like topics like safety, which has the manual itself has like 84 different examples of safe coping skills. We included an additional list of safe ways of coping that were more focused on skills that Christians may use, you know, including things like prayer, for example, meditation, scripture reading, you know, other aspects of coping that may be utilized by believers.
That those that the topics, um, like dealing with anger at, God or others. Uh, One thing that's coming up recently is with the clients I work with, and just you can even see it all over social media, is just folks deconstructing their faith or walking away from the church. And it it's it's some folks they're just done. But there's folks kind of in the middle where it's I still want to believe in God. Deep down inside, I still have faith, but it's just so painful and so confusing, the trauma that I've been through and the hurt that I've experienced in church communities, in church settings. So it's kind of like I'm trying to go to faith, go to scripture, go to God, uh, because I'm still hoping for healing and peace. But so much of my trauma has been hurt from pursuing faith or in faith community, in church communities. It's so messy. It's sad, but I also understand and have compassion for people that just don't want to have anything to do with church, um,
Yeah.
because their pain is just so tied into it.
Yeah.
Um, the um, what would you say, guys, to someone who's like struggling, who's in that place?
Well, that's really one of the goals, and we address that a lot. There's a lot of you can't have a trauma curriculum without addressing abuse. And so one of the things we added was really some of those more painful components of what we would call spiritual abuse in the wounding that happens in faith communities. And so all of the whole addendum is really done a little bit even through that lens of being very sensitive to people in exactly that category. And the goal in the discussion questions, there's a lot of, it's a participatory group. So there's discussion questions and there's commitments that people take home with them to kind of continue the work in between when they're meeting with their group. And a lot of that focuses on exactly that, like, how do I reconcile a good God, or what I think is a good God, with what happened to me? And how do I reconcile being a person of faith and having hope with living through hopeless seasons of my life? And so a lot of this addendum that we've created is to provide a safe place where people can ask those hard questions and be really honest and transparent and say, look, I'm struggling. I don't know if I believe anymore. I don't know what's happening. Like how can this much evil exist in the world? How, those anger pieces of how can God cause, or how can God allow things to happen to me that happen to me? And so really just creating a format for people to process those questions in a safe way. And maybe in the end, some people will find a new path forward in their faith, and maybe in the end some people will walk away from it, but it at least provides a method and of process for people to really ask those questions honestly and grapple with those things exactly. And especially for people, a lot of people similar to what you've talked about, who they're not going to walk away from their faith, but they just can't do church anymore. And so helping them navigate that, like, what does it look like now for me? What does a safe faith community look like for me? And can I find that again?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about, like, what would I say to someone who's in that place, right? Part of what we hope is that with our materials, it can provide a platform for being able to talk very honestly. Because I think a lot of people who are in that place struggle alone, right? They pull away from the church community because they've been hurt there, or have been betrayed, or have received counsel that did further harm, or even things were done to them in the name of God, which is obviously very complex in terms of, how do I turn to God for healing when the things that were done to me were done with sort of like this Christian rationale.
Yes.
And so our hope is, with this, the trauma may be spiritual abuse. That may be what bring people to this material, is experiences of what was done to them within spiritual communities. And so to provide a platform for talking about it openly and with honesty, and even just having some things in black and white on paper sometimes can normalize some of these experiences that people are having. You're not alone, and hopefully tackling some of that head on. There's a scripture that's meaningful to me, and that is Psalm 34:18. And it is that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and near to those who are crushed. And I think there is a culture within some faith communities that when you're going through hardship, when you're broken, when you're at your worst, that this is somehow like in opposition to your faith, right? That if you're experiencing mental health symptoms or you're struggling with addiction, that means that you're not a good Christian. You're not praying hard enough. You're not reading your Bible. The idea oftentimes that's conveyed is not that people are struggling with mental health or addiction. The idea is you've fallen away, right? And what the Bible actually says is that when you are broken, when we're at our worst, that the Lord draws near in those times. He's not far. That mental illness and faith, faith can exist together within a believer. These are not in opposition to each other. And I remember, a session that I provide a number of different trauma treatments, but one of them is EMDR. And I had sort of this moment, and you have those moments in sessions that sometimes will just always be burned into your heart, right? You remember them. And one of them is working with a woman who had been raised in, a I'll say religious home, right? So there was a lot of rigidity and religious ideas and horrific child abuse. I mean, you talk about secondary trauma, which is the idea that we can become traumatized by having secondhand exposure to other people's trauma. It was unbelievable. The things that were done by so many people, and so many people knew and didn't intervene, that it was very difficult to hear. So I was working with her using EMDR, which is another type of treatment, and we were processing one of many experiences that she had. And I remember as we were going through, part of this process is, sort of, any new things coming up to you as you're processing the memory, any new awarenesses or thoughts. And she said, I've never really been a religious person, but I just have this sense that Jesus was with me all along. And it makes me teary now remembering that. But I believe that's true. And that's what scripture says. And it was just one of those moments for someone who had such a lifetime of horror. I can't even talk. Okay, can we edit? Just that it really is true that in her deepest place of wounding, that God was able to speak to her in this place, not because I read a Bible verse to her. I didn't even incorporate. This was done in just a, secular setting with someone, but in the deepest place of her wounding, what came up for her? So she just had this inkling that God was with her the whole time. And I believe that to be true. I've seen that to be true. That's been true in my own story. And so for people who are in that place, I guess what I would want to say is, if you feel broken, if you feel far from God, if you've been hurt, God is not far from you, right? And so it's okay to draw near to him, even in your most broken places.
The safety, the seeking safety, the topics. It when folks are thinking about counseling, thinking about joining a group, and they've never done it before, um, it it can be scary, the idea of opening up and facing the past, uh, because you just have no idea where it will go. And so, as learning from you guys about seeking safety, it seems like it's helpful to have like specific topics and kind of a like some guardrails to this process of facing your past and looking at your behaviors and your habits and your addictions, uh, and it kind of compartmentalizes it. It makes it a little smaller, um, but to have like a process or a pathway, and guidance
Yeah.
and people along through the healing process. Um, just that seems safer.
Mhm.
And yeah, it the Risa, you mentioned earlier that, or you both have, um, that so many people are experiencing trauma, and it, the it it can get so pervasive and common that it's like, oh well, it's just something we have to accept, or or feel complacent about, feel hopeless about. Um, um, but uh, this, what you guys are doing, is fighting against the notion that this is just the way life is, and we're stuck and trapped in it. That there is growth and healing and change possible despite horrific things that you've been through. Um, yeah, I'm so glad you guys are doing this work. Mm,
Thanks. We are too. It's one of the most meaningful things I've ever been a part of.
Mhm. Yeah, me as well. It's one of the beautiful things about the seeking safety model is it assumes recovery is possible. And then that to me, like when you have hope in Christ, healing is possible. And so to take these two things and put them together to really illustrate for people that you don't just have to deal with it or stuff it or accept it. Like you can get better, you can grow, you can make a better life for yourself.
mm. So you guys are have worked super hard to write this curriculum, this part that goes along with seeking safety. As you guys were describing it, this is kind of nerdy, but we play board games.
Yeah.
We have this game called Dominion or Settlers of Catan,
We're
and
familiar.
and,
Yep.
and then you buy the thing, the main thing,
Yeah.
and then every Christmas you buy the other stuff that you add on top of it, but you have to have like it doesn't stand
Expansion packs.
alone, right? Or
We're the
expansion. You're the faith-based expansion pack
Yes.
to seeking
Yes.
safety. Yeah, the essential supplement. Yes.
We need to put that in our book description somewhere on the website.
I love
Okay.
it.
Yes. the
really
expansion
quick
pack.
really quick funny story about that. So we would have we've been working tirelessly. We, Summer mentioned my family and I are overseas in Portugal now, but the last couple years leading up to this, we were pushing so hard to get this book done so I could use it here in ministry. So we were meeting long hours, and we would have seeking safety game nights. So we would come over, and the guys would entertain the kids as much as they could, and we would sit at that picnic table and we would just plow through just hours of writing and working and writing and working. And then eventually we'd hear a noise, and this one time we like looked up, and all the husbands and kids had their faces and hands up against the glass, just staring at us, like wondering when we were going to be done so we could eat and have game night. And then we would spend the rest of the evening hanging out and playing Dominion and other games, and just kind of shaking off the work at the end of the day. So
Fun. Amazing. The it's a journey that not just you guys have gone through, but your families have
yes.
gone through this.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
They have sacrificed too. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
My husband's in construction, and I always laugh that he's the most trauma-informed construction worker on the planet.
oh man, he must have fun talks with his coworkers
Yeah.
at lunch and breaks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's life? What's next this summer, the rest of this year, um, this past year with virtual online stuff, um, and Risa, let's start with you. Like,
Yeah.
so, you're in Portugal. Can you say a little bit more,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
you ended up there?
Yes. Yeah, we are in Portugal now. So my husband and I are missionaries with Team. And so in addition to counseling, I've been doing member care for missions organizations the last few years. And 6 months ago, we followed this crazy vision that we've been pursuing for most of our marriage, and have come here, and we're working with a retreat center that provides hospitality as well as direct care services to local pastors and ministry leaders, as well as missionaries who serve throughout Europe, North Africa, the Middle East.
Wow.
And my husband is a chef. In addition to doing church planting and ministries, he's been a chef all these years, and so he does a lot of the hospitality thing. And then yeah, I do a lot of the counseling and direct care. And so that was a part of the big passion for getting this book done, is wanting to offer this curriculum to ministry workers, to do groups with them. And initially our thought was, obviously doing groups here at the center. And we had talked about, would it be possible to do online groups? Would Seeking Safety work online? Could it be done? Because ultimately, people come and they stay at a retreat center for a few weeks, maybe even a month, and then they go back to the field. And we were wanting to provide continuity of care. Is it possible? Can we go back to the field with people online? And then somewhere through, I remember if it's our first group summer, maybe the second group, somewhere through one of our groups, Western students, COVID happened.
Oh, yeah.
And we had no choice but to move the group online, and it worked fabulously. And so that's kind of, at least where Seeking Safety is concerned, the next step for me is hopefully Summer and I will be able to facilitate some online groups. Our center isn't hosting people at this exact moment, also because of COVID. Europe is just starting to kind of open back up a little bit here. We're hoping to start hosting people again in July, is probably when the borders will open again. But long term, one of the reasons we came here is to help develop this project. Right now, we just have a small 3-bedroom house, but we're in the fundraising process right now to buy a larger property that could host up to 30-35 ministry workers and their families. So lots of hard work and lots of exciting things happening right now over here in Portugal.
That's awesome. One of my favorite childhood memories is when my folks were missionaries on the Thai-Cambodian border. But we got to go to a retreat center for missionary families on the coast of Thailand. And
Awesome.
yeah, that's a great ministry for families. And as a kid, I didn't even understand or realize the strain that my father was under. So, but I just remember it was like one of the happiest times of my life. It's neat you guys are doing that ministry. And in the areas that you listed, sure, like there's violence and fear and stress and trauma.
Yes. Yeah, we
all
have
around.
a lot of workers who work with highly traumatized populations, and then also have their own trauma from things that they've been exposed to, and the violence and things that have happened in their area of service. So there's a huge need for trauma care among missionaries, especially. But even here with local pastors in Portugal, there's just not the help and resources available like pastors in the US have, and even pastors in the US struggle, but there's just not a lot here at all for them. So
yeah. So with technology, you guys will be offering groups in the future. So with your partner across the world, Summer, what what do you have on tap for this year or the near future?
Yeah, so getting the book out was huge. It just posted this week to be able to be accessible for
Oh,
people.
congratulations. I didn't realize
Yeah,
it was just so recent. Yeah.
yes. Um, so yeah, so now it's out either for hard copy or PDF version for people. So it'll be interesting to see what doors that opens. You know, I still have a caseload. I still do seeking safety groups and individual counseling sessions through the group practice. Limited. I'm only there 1 day a week, but so we'll continue to do that. Love my work with my clients, but then most of the time I'm providing trainings in seeking safety. So I envision that there may be some that take a different flavor with this new expansion pack of our faith-based supplement and guide. So perhaps some of those trainings now can be for churches or different faith-based services to be able to get trained in the model, but also in using this addendum as well.
Nice. Um, as we wind down our time for today, um, I'd like to ask each of you if you have any last words for listeners, whether it's for fellow clinicians, uh, for fellow church leaders, or parents, uh, and then writers, or folks who are struggling emotionally or have experienced trauma. So take your pick.
Well, I guess one thought that comes to mind is for ministry workers and church leaders and pastors, is I think there is so much pressure to be able to receive your training and have good biblically sound information and training to be emotionally available for people, to be able to learn how to give a good sermon or facilitate a good group, right? There's a lot of different skills that you have to have. And certainly within what we're talking about today, I wouldn't want people to come away like, oh my gosh, I have to get like a master's degree in an entire different category. Now I need to not only be a pastor, but I have to be a therapist for people.
Mm,
You don't. And so I guess
mm,
what I would say is build partnerships with people in your area. You don't have to have all the tools. You just have to be able to encourage people and give people permission that it's okay. This is not some sort of moral, weakness within you or spiritual flaw. Build relationships with good Christian trauma informed counselors in your area that you can refer to.
mm,
Not just in the idea that like, hey, you should see a counselor, but like, I know a guy, I know a gal that you can reach out to. This is somebody that I know and trust. And so to give people that permission, encouragement to reach out to the healing um, to to the healing work as well. And sometimes people are more likely to do it when their spiritual leaders have sort of given them that permission that this is okay. This is not something that would be in opposition to your faith.
mm. Yeah. You. How about you, Risa?
I think one of the things I would say is like have the courage to do the hard things. I think with most people I work with, the biggest fear is just getting started, of trying to reach out and get help, like either making the assumption that I can't get better, or I don't deserve to get better, or I don't know where to start. I think, they tell little kids when little kids are being hurt or being abused, keep tell an adult. And if that adult doesn't help, tell another adult. And I always use that same feedback with adults, actually. Keep looking until you find your safe people. It's trauma is not something to try to recover from alone.
Mm,
You need your tribe, you need your safe people, and sometimes you find those in the most surprising way. But especially for people, like if you've been hurt in church, look outside of the church. If you've been hurt in family, look outside of family. Like there are those people who might surprise you in your life, but keep looking, but find the safe ones to kind of join you on your journey as you work through things. just that, yeah, that recovery from trauma is possible, but it's better when you have someone to walk that path with you. But it has to be with people who are safe. And if you don't know, then yeah, reaching out to people who might know the right person.
Mm. Find the safe ones. I'm so glad, friends, that you are safe ones to people, and just proud of the work that you've done. And yeah, I just hope this this book, it'll be a blessing to so many people. Um, and thank you for coming on today. We'll share uh, information in the show notes. So how can folks learn more about your resource, and get a hold of you and work with you?
Yeah, so I mean, a good place to go is seekingsafety.org. If you're interested in kind of what the whole model is about, that's the hub of all things seeking safety. That's also who I work with, Treatment Innovations, and provide trainings through. So if you're interested in, having a training for your organization, you can click on the training tab at seekingsafety.org. If you go to the store, you will be able to find both the manual, so you'll need the Seeking Safety manual and the supplement. Um, and both of those are accessible through the store on the website. And then in terms of reaching out to Risa and I, we've provided an email, so you're certainly welcome to reach out to us, or if you're interested in participating in a virtual faith-based seeking safety group in the future, you can let us know that by email as well. And if you end up using it, boy, we'd sure love to hear feedback from anybody using the material. We've had a number of people review it, but really each one of those people provided just really valuable insights, and we actually ended up making some, additions, or, changing different elements based on feedback. So having a wide variety of perspectives and expertise in areas you're using it in, we're super open to whatever you have to share with us about how it goes.
You're planning on doing virtual groups. Are are you also training group leaders? Is that part of the plan?
Yeah, that will be, I mean, I do a lot of trainings. I do, primarily trainings on just seeking safety as a whole. This will be a new facet to the work, which would be providing training for people in using the supplement as well. But I should say that both Seeking Safety and our guide are both designed so that you do not have to go to a training in order to use them. So the
Okay.
Seeking Safety manual, the first 2 chapters talk about how to conduct it. And for our supplement, we also have the first several pages of our guide is a facilitator guide, and it's giving sort of additional consideration. So you don't have to go to a training. It's designed so that you have everything you need within the books.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Savan, for having us, for letting us share our hearts. It's amazing that you can use your platform to give people hope, to let them know that, especially if you're a person of faith, there are different paths to trauma recovery, that there is hope for that. And letting us come and talk up our book, because I would love to see this book in every church and missions organization in the world, get it out there and get people on a better path.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.